Welcome to Haunted Talks, the official podcast of the Haunted Walk, offering ghost tours and paranormal adventures in Kingston, Ottawa, and Toronto, Ontario, and virtual experiences online to the rest of the world. My name is Jim Dean. I am the creative director, and we really appreciate you joining us for today's episode. In December, a German paranormal podcast, Geistergeflüster, reached out to us with a question about one of our blog posts. We were happy to help, but it also seemed like a great opportunity to invite them on the show to share some German ghost stories and have a bit of a cultural exchange about how Germans think about the paranormal. Happily, the co-hosts Katarina and Diandra agreed to join us. But before we get to that, I did want to let you know our in-person tours will resume in Toronto and Kingston in February. To hold you over until then, we currently have all of our previously recorded virtual haunted campfires on sale for $9.99 Canadian each, our lowest price of the year. If you've missed any of our campfires or have never tried one, these chilly, dark winter nights are the perfect time to sit back and enjoy some awesome ghost stories, as told by some of the best storytellers in the world, from places like Salem, St. John's, and London. There are over 20 different shows you can choose from. We will be announcing a new series of live campfires on Friday, January 28th, so stay tuned for that, as we will be exploring even more iconic sites and places. Information on our ghost tours and virtual haunted campfires can be found on our website, which is hauntedwalk.com. I would also recommend following us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, all at Haunted Walk. Be sure to follow or subscribe to the show wherever you listen to us so you don't miss any new episodes. And as always, if you enjoy what we do, please consider recommending us to friends and family, and 5-star reviews for the show are an important and easy way to help support us. It's my pleasure to welcome the co-hosts of a German paranormal podcast called, or is at least as close as I can say it, Geistergeflüster.
Yes.
How is that? Is that the correct name?
Yes, that was pretty good. Pretty good.
Well, Katarina and Diandra, it is wonderful to have you with us today. And as I mentioned in my opening, this is kind of a random encounter where you sent us an email asking about some of our content. And I thought, well, why don't we become paranormal pen pals, or podcast pals, so to speak, and have a quick conversation about your experiences, your observations, and your kind of love, I assume, of the paranormal. But as for the name of your podcast, and I'm not going to say it again because it looked like I may have said it right the first time. Does that translate into something easily in English that our listeners might identify with?
Yes,
Totally.
it actually does. It just means something like ghost whisperer.
Ghost
Or
whisperer.
ghost whisperers.
Ghost whispers, actually.
Oh,
Just
whispers, yes.
Yeah, because it's like Geister is the word for ghosts in German, and what you would pronounce as translate as whispers is the Geflüster, which is actually together it is just simply ghost whispers.
And does that allude to the ghosts themselves kind of whispering from the past? Or is that you kind of telling their stories? Or both, I suppose?
I would say both.
Yeah.
Yeah, as we tell ghost stories or stories of haunted places in our podcast, it's on the one hand us talking about the ghosts and what they're doing or what they what they
Haunting.
haunting. Yeah, and on the other hand, it's the ghosts or the paranormal itself, I would say.
Well, before we talk about your podcast, which we're definitely going to do, it'd be nice to learn a little bit more about each of you. And Katarina, maybe we can start with you. Could you share a little bit of your backstory with us, and what particularly has drawn you to the paranormal as well?
Well, sure. First of all, I'm really excited to be on this show, just to be invited, and we both are. So it's my pleasure or our pleasure to be here, anyways. And actually, yeah, there has never really been a special occurrence that drew me into the whole paranormal stuff. I guess I kind of was always interested in paranormal and in ghosts, and already as a child, I loved all the Halloween specials, cartoons. I mean, Halloween was never really a big thing in Germany when we were small. It's only starting to be more special now as the modern world and America is swapping over to Germany as well. So, but still, they would show a lot of Halloweenish cartoons in the TV shows and everything, and I always loved to watch that. And but what I also had, there were some occasions really where I thought, or I believe so, that there was some kind of paranormal interruption as well, and so which would all only make my interest in the subject quite deeper.
And in your professional life, do you work in storytelling or historical research, or any connections with your day job as to your passion project here?
Not at all. It is only passion and hobby, really, because well, my usual job would be to sit in the customer service of the company and regulate complaints and everything. So, it has nothing really paranormal to do. And also, I'm not really a big journalist or writer or media trained person. So, it's just a hobby, really.
Now, Diandra, I say kind of same question for you about your background, your interests, as well as the paranormal. But I also can't help noticing you two look quite similar. Are you related? Are you sisters by any chance?
Yes, we are. We are. So I'm the younger sister, and Katrina is the older one.
The old one.
Older, not old.
Yeah, I know.
So I'm Diandra, and I guess I have the same background to the paranormal like Katarina, as we grew up together, obviously. And I remember one vacation we spent in Ireland. I guess I was 10, 11, 12, something around that age, and where we saw this big mansion behind a closed gate, Loftus Hall. And back at that age, we already said, oh gosh, we would love to go in there and see what's inside and see if there are ghosts and all this stuff. And but we couldn't, as it was private back then, and the gates were closed. We fulfilled the dream years later, but back then we had no chance. And but I have to say I never experienced any paranormal stuff myself. I don't know if I don't have this special feeling for it or something like this. But I do like ghost stories, and I do believe in ghosts and all this paranormal stuff. But my professional life doesn't have anything to do with it as well. So I work in HR of an IT company. So nothing to do with paranormal.
And I think you brought up a really interesting point there. you both mentioned that you haven't had any direct paranormal experiences so far. And one thing we know from our tour guides is that some of them really want to have something happen to them, and some of them kind of hope nothing happens to them. Where do you two fall in that camp? Do you want to have a paranormal experience, or are you happy to just kind of tell the stories?
I think it depends on the actual thing that should happen to you. So I would not pretty much be a fan of being haunted by any kind of demon or evil ghost.
Good point.
I guess, but I would be quite happy if, for example, if there would be an appearance of a dead loved one that shows itself to you, just to make sure, or to tell you, look, I'm okay, or something like that. So this would be a thing I would really love to experience, but none of the bad stuff. Really not.
Yeah, for me the same.
But you mentioned how, if it was a family member a family ghost who appeared before you, that would be one thing compared to something a little more scary. And this kind of leads me to questions about, what are common perceptions about the paranormal in Germany? Because I think there we're talking about different kinds of ghosts, which makes me think about, well, are certain ghosts more prevalent than others in Germany? Or I wonder, and maybe Diandra, we can start with you with this one. What is the general perception of the paranormal in Germany? I guess first, as far as belief, like you mentioned, you believe in ghosts. Is that a common view that's held by most Germans?
I would say no. I guess it's not that common in Germany as it is in other countries to believe in such things, or at least I don't recognize it being that popular, so to say, being or believe in ghosts or paranormal activities. I guess I would say here are not that many ghost tours or something like this as it is in other cities. I guess 1 or 2 cities have some ghost tours or more paranormal tours, but it's not that common, I would say, here in Germany.
I would agree to what Diandra said there. Just make the difference that there are quite a lot of ghost tours I can see in the big cities here in Germany. And I think they are really solely for the purpose of getting tourists to spend money. So the cultural background on this is not, I'd rather say, as you said in the beginning, it's more something that is ridiculed than really taken seriously here. I also think there are quite more people that believe in such things, but they don't really like to speak up with it and to actually admit it, because they fear the disbelief and the not really acceptance, like from the other people. So it's really kind of not such a thing here, and not taken seriously at all, I'd say. They all love the horror movies, but ghosts in real life wouldn't be believed in.
Yeah, and I guess a good example for it as well is when we're looked for some German haunted places for our podcast, and we did our research. There was quite nothing, or really less information or blog posts or something like this in German on German blogs, but so many on English speaking blogs about German probably haunted places. So that was quite funny.
Yeah,
that we had more in English for German places than in German.
That is really, really interesting and quite surprising.
Yes.
It's always dangerous, of course, to talk about an entire nationality in one particular way.
Of course.
But
sure.
Our view of Germans, the stereotypical view, is like, very efficient, very straightforward, no messing around. And that kind of makes me wonder a question about religious beliefs in Germany. Because if on the one hand you're saying people are very skeptical to a point of kind of mocking people who believe in the paranormal, it's also my impression, though, that Germany has certainly a very long history and connections with the church and things of that nature. How do you see that connection? I guess first, am I correct in that assumption that Germany is a fairly religious place? And does that surprise you at all to think that there's a high belief in that and maybe less so in the paranormal? How do those issues kind of play out in your minds? And maybe Katarina, we could start with you on this one.
It's a fairly good description you gave about Germany there. I'd also add rational to that description because, this is really what Germans are, I'd say, and nothing out of the normal, I'd say. So, funny thing is really that there is a lot of religion in our past. I wouldn't say there is so many of it today, depending on the area. I'd say maybe the north might be quite religious still, and also the south.
Bavaria, yes.
Yeah, and some kind of the middle where we are is more like wishy-washy, and so we were actually brought up really as Christians, as Protestants, but also we are not that strict. So and we're not going to church every Sunday, but the connection between the paranormal and the church, I'd say, because the church doesn't want to have out of the normal as well, because they want to tell you what you have to believe in the past, of course in the past, but they always wanted to tell you, and they always did tell you what you have to believe. So there is a lot of folklore in Germany, like little fairy tales about small dwarfs or gnomes that will help you in the household, but it's not really paranormal things. So the paranormal would be, I think, a step too far in what you should have believed. Yeah, it is quite difficult with the Germans, their religion and the belief in the paranormal. And I know Ireland does, for example, Ireland, because we know Ireland pretty well. Ireland does the combination way better with religion and paranormal than Germany does. I don't know why, though. I don't know why.
When I think about some of the cathedrals in Germany, the churches in particular, a phrase that comes to mind to me is kind of the weight of history. And by that, I simply mean that if, for example, here in Canada, if we take a group past a very old building for us, which of course is much younger than your old buildings, people will often respond like, oh, I bet that building is haunted. And what I think they're trying to say is, I bet that building has a lot of stories to tell. I've not been to Germany. I'd love to. But when you're particularly in the areas where there are older buildings or really old structures that carry this weight of history, how does that impact kind of, I guess this is, I don't know, a fair question, but the German mindset? How are old historical buildings treated there? Here, they're kind of prized because we have so few. But is that different there? And I'm wondering if that's a different way of how ghost stories get told, because for us, the real outliers, where I kind of assume in certain parts of the city, depending which cities you're in, it could be much more common. Diandra, I don't know if that's a clear question, but any kind of comments along the weight of history and how that's perceived in Germany?
Yeah, I guess the cities which have those old buildings which survived the wars are pretty proud of those buildings, and we have a lot of museums in them, or are especially protected from the country itself, so you can't do any big changes on the building to protect the history of the building, so that it doesn't have modern windows, for example. or modern doors. But the paranormal stuff, I guess many people don't see it that way, that old buildings could be haunted, either good or bad. They just see, in at least what I would say, that it's an old building with a big history, but that's it. So they're proud, or not that proud, on the history of that building, but that's it, nothing more.
And Katarina, when you tell your friends and family, or when you were first starting, we're starting a paranormal podcast, I'm interested then what the response was to the people around you. Were they excited, or were they skeptical about that? Like, why are you doing this thing about ghost stories?
They were very interested, most of us, because we have, luckily, we have a family that actually believes in, or mostly believes in, things like ghosts and hauntings, or just strange, weird, paranormal things that cannot be explained. So they're at least not saying, this is not there, so stop talking about it. So they were pretty interested, and of most of them would straight listen to it for at least the first episodes we actually claimed they have to listen to, because otherwise we wouldn't have any listeners.
We all got to start somewhere, don't we? That's true.
Yeah. So we actually forced them into listening, of course, as well. But most of them really brought the honest, the honest feedback that it sounded pretty well and pretty interesting. And even if they wouldn't believe in ghosts, or if they don't believe in ghosts, it's really interesting to listen to the stories, whether they're true or not.
Now, Diandra, I have listened to your most recent episode, but a little bit of a barrier in that it is in German, of course. So I did listen to it. It sounds like a great show. And I know we have listeners who listen to our podcast, Haunted Talks, who do speak German. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if you could share with me a little bit what your episodes are like. What kinds of stories do you cover? Is there any, especially as sisters, which I think is such an interesting dynamic, any other ways of telling the stories or talking about them that you think's a little bit interesting to your podcast?
For each episode, we have like a big topic, which is mostly a country. So that we visit. In our last episode, it was India. And then each of us looks for, in this special case, for a haunted place. And we just check up if we don't have the same place which we're preparing. This would be a bummer. And then one starts with a story, which we script beforehand. And after the scripted part is done with the first story, we talk freely about our thoughts and our opinions, and the other hears a story for the first time in the episode.
It sounds great, and I do have to compliment you both. Your English is very good, wonderful, and I'm, as my German is terrible, I just want to give you a quick compliment and thank you for being able to communicate it in my native language. But I think this is a great time to kind of get a sample of what your podcast is like by asking you if there is some German ghost stories that you can share with us. I know our audience would absolutely love to hear them.
Okay, so I brought a little story about a ghost which only shows up at noon.
A woman ghost.
Yeah, a woman ghost. And she's in the Spreewald, Spree Forest, which is in Brandenburg. That's in east of Germany, near Berlin. And she appears at noon. She's an old woman. And she appears on the fields to field workers, mostly around 1-2 p.m. And looks for field workers which don't make a pause during noon. And she looking for a victim over the fields, and when she found one who is still working on the field, she gives him a chance to save his life. If he's able to talk an hour about professional field work, he can an hour. He can save his life. But if he's not able to do so, she has an I looked up the word, I guess, scythe, like an
a scythe,
a scythe, and the head is off.
Gone.
So that's a Moonwrath of Spreewald.
I'm fairly sure I could actually save my life with talking about it now.
But you have to talk about professional field work. So
I can. I could probably do that. No,
that is a very specific haunting. It's so fascinating because a lot of the ghost stories, that I seem to research or we research, if someone is misbehaving, you think about a student, and we have a great story here in Ottawa about a kind of the ghost of a teacher that tells the kids to get back to class. Usually when someone's messing around or not doing their job, but in this case, the ghost wants them to take a lunch break. Is that what it is?
Yes, it is. So actually, I like this ghost.
and listen to it. If they don't, they die. So
really?
Now, does that speak to the German psyche that you want to just keep working and not take lunch? Because lunch is pretty important. I don't know.
I love make lunch, so I can't compare to those field workers who doesn't. But at least in my company as well, there are a few who don't do lunch breaks. So maybe the ghost should make a visit there.
I think it might refer to the people who basically forget about lunch. So not really.
This could be as well.
With a thought behind that, not really on purpose skip lunch, but just forget them because they are so involved in their work. So that might refer again to all our keen and good worker Germans out there. So.
It is kind of funny that the way to get out of this trouble with the ghost is to kind of work and do an hour-long presentation, which is still not lunch.
But I have always a PowerPoint present.
Oh, that is a great story. I've never heard one quite like that. That is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing
You're welcome.
with us. I feel like I have to go take lunch immediately after this interview now, just to play it safe.
You should
too.
Better we sent you the woman from the Spreewald.
And Katarina, did you have a kind of a favorite story or a German story you enjoy sharing?
I wanted to tell one, and then just spontaneously, shortly before we started that Zoom call here, I changed my mind and jumped to the story of the Headless Rider that most people know as, from the movie of Sleepy Hollow, probably. But what I didn't know, and probably, I don't know, one of the few people out there, but I didn't know this is actually originated in Germany. So the idea of the Headless Rider comes from our West German Rhine area. And the Headless Riders was not only one, but there were said to be many. And they didn't kill people on purpose. Like it was not their intention to really be bad and evil and kill the people they meet, but actually to warn them not being sinful, because the riders became the Headless Riders out of sinful life. I like that story because I always liked the Headless Rider. I don't know why, but he's so creepy and also he's so mystical. And so he's actually, or all of these Headless Riders were born out of sinful life, maybe suicide, maybe lies, or what was obviously, I read, obviously very common for the former days in 1700s and 1800s to repost their borders, like the border of your property. And they had these, they didn't have fences or something, but they had these stones, border stones basically. And what was quite common is to take the stone and just put it maybe a little bit further into the property of the other man or family that had it. So this was thought to be a very, very sinful thing to do. So also this was very, very much punished. So also out of this, a Headless Rider was born. So they also didn't behead anyone they saw. So they could actually kill just with a bare touch of their finger or hand. So they didn't need a sword or an axe or something of that sort. I like the idea that it's German, actually. There is also a saying that there was a soldier who was the first rider, actually, and basically not born out of sinful life, but he was so unlucky and got beheaded by a cannonball. So and it was set to and from that day on he was set to ride the nights searching for this cannonball whatsoever, because I mean he had his head on his lap. So but he was searching for the cannonball to whatever to do with that. But so the story of Sleepy Hollow or the Headless Rider was actually brought to America or Canada from an author. I named him here Washington Irving, and it was said to that he learned about that legend in Germany when he had an educational trip around 1807 to 1809. So and then he brought back the story because he found it obviously very good.
Wow, I wasn't aware of that at all. That's quite fascinating, and I think you're right. The image in our mind's eye, or in Hollywood depictions of kind of the headless horseman, as we would call it, is just terrifying. Just monstrous.
Yeah.
And I love how too it's a ghost story to kind of pressure correct moral behavior. Much like the same ways we on our podcast a number of episodes ago we covered how children were often told don't do a certain thing or the boogeyman will come get you in the middle of the night.
Yeah,
it's kind of very don't claim your neighbor's property or the headless horseman may come to pay you a visit.
Yes. Yeah, it's also like afterwards the Headless Riders would appear if you only try to plan a very hideous thing, like try to murder your neighbor because you want their property, or try to I don't know, intrigue something in your mind. So they would appear to warn you, to show you, look, if you do that and if you really try to process this, you're ending up like me, headless and riding all night and warning people not to do this.
Wow, and amazing. It's, a lot of ghost stories, sometimes the root of the haunting can be much older, but in this one, it's a ghost story that's existed as a ghost story since you said early 1800s, when Washington Irving was there. So before that as well. That's a great story. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. Did you have another story you wanted to share as well?
So I was actually talking about the so-called Gongers. So a Gonger is also referred to as a returner, and they are mostly seen on our islands Sylt and Amrum, which are in the north of Germany, and these are usually sailors who got lost on sea or who died on sea, and they are called the returners because they would occasionally come back to their families at home as dead persons, obviously, but they would come back to watch them and to haunt them so that the family and friends would not forget about these sailors who died on the sea. So They are mostly peaceful. I didn't find any record of them being evil or harm anyone. So they are peaceful but quite creepy because they look like kind of water bodies, like really pumped up and spongy and slimy and stuff like that. So you wouldn't want them in your house. But then again, they are quite peaceful. But you shouldn't shake hands with them. I mean, I can't imagine why you would anyway, looking by them, but you shouldn't shake hands either way. I mean, there are people that could forget how they look just knowing that's the loved husband or brother or sister or whatever. But if you shake hands with them, your hand will burn and fall down to ashes and it's gone. So don't shake hands with the gonger.
That's pretty serious right there.
It is.
Would you say they're, what it makes me think of course, are zombies? Are they kind of like zombies then?
I wouldn't say so because they wouldn't crave your brain.
Yeah.
So they probably look like zombies though, but I think they are. I imagine them as very sad figures in the ghostly world. So being a sailor, getting lost, getting killed on sea within a storm or something, and then never see your family again. So for some reason they figured out a way to be able to go back, and then also the fear of being forgotten, maybe the key to why they're coming back and why they return. So I don't see them as very bad ghosts, ugly ghosts, but not bad.
As long as you don't shake hands, you're fine.
Yeah, as long as you don't shake hands with them, please don't.
There's a lot of rules about these German ghosts, it feels like.
Yeah. Keep your distance.
Interesting, very interesting. Well, I appreciate you sharing that, that story as well. So interesting, just hearing these similar themes that we would share in North America about these stories and kind of some of the big picture things, as you mentioned, the idea of being forgotten or us forgetting our loved ones, I think is an equal concern, Very interesting to see how we have these slightly different takes, but the kind of the core message is very similar. I'd certainly like to thank you both for being on the show today. It's been a great pleasure to have you here with us. The podcast is Geistergeflüster. Yes.
Perfectly. Yes, it is.
And I'll put a link in our show notes so people can go right to it. But if people are interested in listening to the podcast, where can they find it?
All common podcast players like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. You can find them.
And do you know what your next episode will be on yet? Or is it still a work in progress?
It's still work in progress as we're officially on baby pause because of me. But we try to publish a new episode every 2 weeks. We can't promise anything, but if it all works out, the next episode will be on next week on Thursday.
Well, we can tell you so much. It will probably be Germany because we took this topic here. So thinking like, look, we could also make an episode out of this, like not only the interview, but also dive a bit deeper into the stories we might have shared here. So
that sounds great. Well, again, thank you both so much for being here. It's been a pleasure to meet with you and chat a little bit about the paranormal.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation.
Yes, it was exciting and a pleasure, really.
Definitely.
Once again, a big thank you, or Dankeschön, to Katarina and Diandra for joining us. It was a great conversation, and I really enjoyed having the opportunity to speak with them. And of course, thank you for joining us. Information about our virtual haunted campfires and in-person tours can be found on our website, which is hauntedwalk.com. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, all at Haunted Walk. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe or follow the show wherever you listen to us so you don't miss any new episodes. As always, a big thank you to our Haunted Talks team, including Michelle Dennis, our outstanding audio editor. Until we meet again, don't forget to eat your lunch and sweet dreams.